Now it's time to break down the 4 major reasons why Dragon Ball GT is bad. To borrow a phrase, we're going to call them the 4 grand problems with GT. We saw most of them play out in the very first episode, and while these issues may not be quite as dire in the rest of the series as they were in episode 1, they are definitely present, time and time again, for the entirety of the show's 64 episode run. These are major overall problems that impact all of Dragon Ball GT, and their constant presence is why I think the show failed. GT's first and most major flaw is an obvious one. It's just poorly written. Nothing makes any sense at all. You heard me asking all those questions when recapping the first episode, right? If you're watching a show or a movie and you're constantly saying, huh? Or what? Or wait, that doesn't make any sense. Or how did that happen? Or why don't they just do this? Just do this simple thing and the problem is solved. Yeah, if you're asking questions like that constantly, that's not a good sign. And it continues for the entire rest of the series. By the end of an episode, you're twisted into a pretzel because 18 things just happened that made no sense at all. And familiar characters act in ways that don't make sense for them in the situations presented. This is something important when writing a sequel series like this. The audience knows the characters and how they act. In the case of Dragon Ball, that is decades worth of prior anime and manga material where the audience knows Goku, how he acts, and what he'd do in certain situations. And when such a beloved character acts in a way he normally wouldn't, the audience is going to notice, and they're probably going to flip the channel if it gets too insulting, or too dumb, or doesn't feel enough like the original character. I never ask questions of logic like that when watching Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z. In fact, I think I asked more questions about character and world logic in the first episode of GT than I did with the entirety of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. And yes, the standard I'm going to hold this show to is Dragon Ball Z. Turns out that Akira Toriyama fellow, he was a very smart man. He pretends like he's this aloof guy who was just making things up week to week, but let's get real. The man was a genius. He used logic when writing his story. His characters were smart, sharp, and they'd act the way the reader expects them to when the big moment arrives. His stories were tight. The humor landed. The big dramatic moments are moments we'll remember forever, and it's all because we were emotionally invested in what was happening because he didn't lose you along the way with nonsense. He didn't allow the reader to poke holes in his story like I just did for a mere single episode of Dragon Ball GT. I mean, I'm sure there's some nonsense here or there in DBZ, but it's never to the level where I'm pausing the show after every sentence and writing 3 questions in my notes that the show doesn't care to answer for the audience. And no, these are not nitpicks. These are major issues with major plot points. You cannot screw up Goku turning into a kid. You cannot screw up the Black Star Dragon Balls. These are major parts of the show. It's how you kick this entire grand tour off, and it's like they didn't even think about this stuff for more than 5 seconds. Throughout the series, the audience is asked to believe too many dumb things that make no sense at all. The characters are constantly acting like complete morons and ignoring the obvious solution to a problem, and the show either doesn't explain itself well or at all. We saw it in episode 1, and it just stacks and stacks from there. And it continues with Baby, and it continues with Super 17, and even the evil dragons. You are questioning the logic of the characters, both heroes and villains, for the entire show. You are asking how certain things are possible for the entire show. You are dealing with nonsensical storytelling that completely ignores things we as readers know from the original story for the entire show. And you never get any answers to these questions. Perhaps worst of all, it's not that hard to fix this stuff. The Dragon Ball universe is so huge and the possibilities are so vast, you have the freedom to do basically anything you want to reach a chosen end goal. Goku turning into a kid? A super-powered Android 17? You can make that stuff work if you really think about it, but at times, I feel like the GT writing team just wasn't thinking that hard. Rest assured, I will continue to point out the inconsistent, illogical, nonsensical elements of GT as we continue through the story. And as you could tell from the length of this video, there is a lot of them. Logic is conveniently ignored at nearly every turn. I want you to think back to Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. Heck, even Dragon Ball Super. What iconic moments come to mind? I could probably name 20 in a minute. Toriyama was the master of build-up and payoff, whether that was panel to panel or over the course of an entire story arc. The big climactic moment, it hit hard every time. And it's all because he would build it up just right. Provide those twists and turns along the way to throw you off a bit, and then, when the timing was perfect, you'd get that big moment. And it was always so satisfying. The end result was iconic moment after iconic moment. Moments that will live in our minds forever. Now I want you to think back to GT. What iconic moments come to mind? I mean, yes, it was memorable when it ended, but outside of that, there's not too many classic GT moments, right? There's probably a lot of you out there that can't think of a single one. And no, I'm not talking about the great character designs that have stood the test of time. I know they're great, they keep showing up for a reason. I'm talking about the actual story, actual moments between characters that made you feel something. Anger, excitement, fear, shock, sadness, laughter, inspiration, elation. There's plenty in the original story. Not too many come to mind when we look at GT. And that's because the pacing of this show is terrible. And what I mean by that is the show moves too quickly. There is no opportunity to let cool moments sink in because things happen so fast and we have to move on immediately to the next thing. Nothing is gonna feel important if you're moving too quickly. You gotta let those cool moments sink in with the viewer. We already saw it in episode 1. Oob finishes his 5 years of training with Goku. He's gone in a minute, and we immediately move on. Bye, Oob. And this is a serious issue that continues for the entirety of the show. I think you'll be stunned at how many cool moments there actually are in Dragon Ball GT, but it's all let down in the execution. If the execution is poor, a cool moment isn't gonna stick with you. And in almost every case, it's because this show is racing from moment to moment, racing through some awesome ideas that had the potential to become iconic. We get so many transformations, sometimes multiple per episode. It's like, how am I supposed to be afraid or intimidated by a villain's transformation if he's on to the next one 5 minutes later? This happens constantly. In GT, there is no build-up, there are no twists, or really any focus on anyone other than Goku. All we do is wait until Goku gets there. Nothing exciting happens in the meantime. The show moves so quickly that we could barely check in on our secondary cast, much less give them a real focus. A thing happens and we immediately move on to the next thing. Goku beats a dragon, then beats the next dragon, then beats the next dragon. Wow, how exciting. Toriyama never wrote the original story like that. So monotonous, so straightforward and boring. Just rushing from one plot point to the next with no surprise or excitement to be found. And as a result of this simplistic and rushed style of storytelling, there's almost never a satisfying payoff, and the result of that is GT doesn't really have any iconic moments. Funny enough, the poor pacing sometimes happens in the opposite direction too. Certain moments of the show drag, and it's like, why are you spending so much time on this boring thing and you rush through a fight or a transformation or a character delivering a powerful attack? That's when you need to take your time. I'm gonna have some really fun comparisons later in the video where we look at how Dragon Ball Z handles certain situations and compare it to how GT handles almost the exact same situation. The difference is night and day, and it all comes down to pacing. Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z had perfect pacing. Yeah, I know, I could hear you whining about 5 minutes and Namek and all that stuff. But DBZ wouldn't be as big as it is today if people really had a problem with that stuff. DBZ is perfect just the way it is, and all those slower moments were just build-up for the ultimate satisfying payoff moment in the end. I wish GT took its time like Dragon Ball Z did. This one is probably the most common criticism I see pointed at GT, and it's absolutely true. There is some cool stuff going on here. Negative energy created from overuse of the Dragon Balls? That's a cool idea. A villain that wants revenge on the Saiyans for destroying their planet? Cool idea. Heck, I even like the idea of going back to the series' roots and going on a fun adventure finding all the Dragon Balls. But in the end, it's the execution that lets all of these great ideas down. The two big problems I just outlined above are to thank for that. You could have a great idea, but if you follow it up in a way where nothing makes sense, or the scenes are paced in a way where big climactic moments breeze by and don't feel special, well, good luck making the audience care. I mean, we just saw Daima take a number of designs and concepts from GT, but simply present them in an interesting new way. Even Toriyama himself was willing to play around with some of the ideas that originated from GT. I wouldn't be totally opposed to more of the decent ideas we saw in GT being brought back in future Dragon Ball material if they can just clean up the execution on it. Our final overall problem is a massive problem indeed. Let's look at this image of the cast from the end of the Dragon Ball manga. Now let's take away the ones that don't appear at all in GT, or appear only in an extremely quick blink and you miss it cameo. And now, let's take out the ones that don't do anything of note. Yeah, you might not believe it, but it's true. Dragon Ball GT is the Goku show through and through. GT stands for Goku time. People complained when Super was airing that there was too much of a focus on just Goku and Vegeta. I wish Vegeta got that kind of treatment in GT. And the other secondary characters at least had some moments in Super. I remember them doing things. In GT, they mostly exist to give Goku their power so he can fight the villain. This happens multiple times. Of course, in the original manga, secondary characters always had their time to shine. Goku was always away for some reason or another, so it was up to Gohan, or Krillin, or Piccolo, or Vegeta, or Yamcha, or Gotenks, or heck, even Ten Shinhan to get in there and do what had to be done. Even Chaozu's one big moment in all of DBZ has become iconic. With GT, it's not even close. And it sucks. It really sucks because there are so many great characters in this show, so many great voice actors in their prime, and none of them ever get to do anything of importance except for Goku. Pan is definitely the number 2 character in the show by a pretty wide margin, but we're gonna learn exactly how the GT writing team saw Pan. In short, she didn't actually do anything of note. She mostly exists to watch on the sidelines or be put in peril so Goku can rescue her. It's a total waste, and Pan should have been so much more in this show. So many of my favorite moments from DBZ center around the secondary cast. Remember Piccolo vs 17? Super Ghost Kamikaze Attack? I don't even have to mention Gohan vs Cell. And who could forget Piccolo fusing with Nail? These are all iconic. There's nothing like that in GT, with like maybe a small handful of exceptions. Trust me, I'll point out any moments where the secondary characters come off like something special, or they show up and get something done of importance, but I'll warn you now, it's not too frequent. I think it's time to get back to our buddy, Kozo Morishita. He was asked in the Dragon Book interview about Goku and how he was the main character and had to be the main focus of the story, and here's what he had to say. When all is said and done, the protagonist of Dragon Ball is Son Goku. Characters such as Piccolo, Vegeta, or Trunks may be popular too, but in the end, it's Goku. When Goku's not the main character, the story gets out of hand, or perhaps I should say it becomes unstable. After roughly 500 TV episodes and over 15 movies worth of Dragon Ball, I can tell that Goku is no ordinary character. For instance, back with Dragon Ball Z, When there were episodes with characters other than Goku fighting, even if the ratings didn't suffer, younger viewers lost interest. Adults watch for the story, so they can still enjoy watching how things play out, even if Goku doesn't appear. But children watch for the characters, so you have to have Goku appear. That's why with Dragon Ball Z, when Goku didn't appear for a while in the original manga, we thought long and hard about how to have him show up in the anime. So, when I hear the producer of the show talking like this, it kind of makes my blood boil. Basically what he's saying here is Akira Toriyama's storytelling doesn't draw ratings or hold the interest of kids. You know, the guy who wrote Dragon Ball, one of the most popular and beloved stories ever told, the guy who wrote the comic that generated a multi-billion-dollar empire, yeah, that guy. According to Morishita, you can't just write GT the way Toriyama wrote Dragon Ball. Come on, what does he know? Akira, baby, I love you, but we'll take it from here. We're gonna take your shit and make it better. You want television ratings? The answer's simple. You gotta have Goku in there all the time. I can't believe I even have to explain this because it's so obvious, but I'm gonna do it anyways. The fact that someone that worked on Dragon Ball said this on the record just baffles me. Goku going away is the key to the entire story of Dragon Ball. If Goku is just around all the time, there's no tension. He's the strongest. If he was always around, then you can't miss him. Toriyama was completely deliberate when he would send Goku away for whatever reason. He had to die to Raditz, so the rest of the cast could fight the Saiyans, and then Goku could come back and, I don't know, do this. Goku had to show up to Namek late so he could do this. Goku had to be in the healing tank so the rest of the cast could shine against Frieza. Goku had to be late coming to Earth so Trunks could do this. I mean, do I have to continue here? The heart disease in the Android saga, his death for the majority of the Buu saga, it was all done in service of the story. You let the other characters shine, and then when things seem the most hopeless, there he is. Goku to the rescue. It's simple, and it works. And the fact that a producer on an official Dragon Ball anime doesn't see that tells you everything you need to know about the quality of this show. The people working on GT simply did not understand Dragon Ball or Akira Toriyama's storytelling. It's as simple as that. I'm also interested in the ratings angle here. He's basically saying younger viewers would tune out when Goku wasn't around, but that ratings didn't suffer? Then how do you know younger viewers lost interest? If they lost interest, they'd change the channel and the rating would go down. That's how ratings work. Actually looking at the ratings, it looks like they did dip a bit during the Buu saga when Gotenks and Gohan were fighting Buu. But again, this is a necessary evil. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. You have to have Goku leave, and maybe the ratings suffer for a little while in the short term, but it's all in service of making Goku's big return that much more powerful and exciting. GT was proof that you can't just have Goku around all the time and expect the ratings to go up, or even stay steady. You risk monotonous storytelling, which is exactly what we had with GT. All the focus is on Goku, none of the other characters get shit, and you actually start to get sick of Goku a little bit along the way. You bore the audience by overexposing the star character and they begin to tune out. That's not a good thing. Even Maekawa, one of the most prominent writers on the show, has this absolute gem of a comment when asked why Piccolo doesn't do crap for the entire series. Because of connections going back to Dragon Ball Z, if Vegeta is a character who appears in relation to Goku, then Piccolo is a character who should appear in relation to Gohan. In parts, there were those sorts of scenes where Gohan and Piccolo interact with each other, but GT comes to focus around the story of Goku and Vegeta. So hypothetically, if GT had gone forward with Gohan being depicted as the focus, it might have become a story where Piccolo had a flashy, big role to play. So basically what he's saying is we didn't do shit with Gohan, so you better believe we weren't going to do shit with Piccolo either. The funny thing is, Vegeta doesn't do anything either. He's a mustache in the first arc, gets taken over by Baby, gets completely whooped by Super 17, and then just exists to fuse with Goku at the end. Like, he does nothing. So I don't know what the hell they're talking about here. Trust me, we'll get into Vegeta more as the video goes on. But in summary, the people working on this show didn't want to give any character but Goku the big moments. Our secondary cast exists to get beat up while we wait for Goku to show up. I'm not sure if anyone other than Goku even damages any of our major villains. There's one single exception, which we'll get to later. So, those are the 4 major issues with GT, and we're going to see them pop back up a lot. Now that I've spelled them out, we can continue with the story.